Hey everybody, welcome back to Race of History. Today we're getting into the Napoleon's Marshal series. I'm super excited about this. Let's get started.
Terror belli, decus pacis. Terror in war, ornament in peace. The words inscribed on every French marshal's baton. In France, the title of Marshal or Maréchal goes back at least to the 13th century. It represents the highest possible position of military authority. Authority symbolized by a marshal's baton. The title was abolished during the French Revolution as incompatible with the egalitarian spirit of the age. But in 1804, Napoleon founded a new empire and restored the ancient rank. That year he picked 18 of France's best generals and made them Marshals of the Empire. 8 more were created in the years that followed. The Marshals outranked everyone in the new empire, apart from Napoleon's family, princes and ministers of state. They came from every background, sons of aristocrats and innkeepers, professional soldiers, and those who'd learned on the job, old-school Republicans and Bonaparte loyalists. The youngest, just half the age of the oldest. And though Marshal was a civil title, not strictly a military rank, the men known to the army as les gros bonnets, the big hats, were arguably the most extraordinary, diverse, brilliant and flawed group of military commanders in history. The most favoured were showered with titles and wealth. But the price too was high. Half were wounded, 3 were killed or died of wounds, 2 were executed. This is Epic History TV's guide to Napoleon's Marshals. All 26 have been ranked according to our own evaluation of their achievements as Marshals, with expert guidance from retired Lieutenant Colonel Rémy Porte, former Chief Historian of the French Army. First, a thank you to our sponsor, Call of War. Call of War is a free online PvP strategy. To get 13,000 gold and 1 month of High Command subscription for free. Available only for 30 days. More than 2,000 French generals served in the Revolutionary and Napoleonic Wars. Many were brilliant leaders. A few probably deserved to be marshals, more than some who were. Any selection can only be difficult and highly subjective, but here's our pick of 12 of the best. Bertrand, Napoleon's faithful aide-de-camp, who commanded 4th Corps at the Battle of Leipzig. Clausel, a veteran commander of the war in Spain. Desaix, Napoleon's close friend, killed at Marengo, aged 31. Prince Eugène, Napoleon's adopted son, a hero of the Russian retreat. Gérard, one of Napoleon's best corps commanders by 1814, made a marshal by King Louis-Philippe in 1830. Goudon, whose infantry division bore the brunt of the fighting at Auerstedt in 1806, died of wounds near Smolensk in 1812. Junot, who first served with Napoleon at Toulon in 1793, probably committed suicide after his fall from favour in 1813.
Wow.
Lassalle, the Hussar general, among the best light cavalry commanders of the Napoleonic Wars, killed at Wagram, aged 34. Maison, who told his division on the morning of Leipzig that they must win that day or all be killed, made Marshal by King Charles X in 1829. Nansouty, the heavy cavalry commander who died of wounds and exhaustion, aged 46. Saint-Hilaire, hero of Austerlitz, died of wounds received at Aspern in 1809. Vandamme, of whom Napoleon once said, "If I had to invade hell, I'd want him commanding the vanguard." And now, Napoleon's 26 marshals, ranked in order of merit. 26. Marshal Perignon, When Napoleon created the first 18 marshals, 4 were honorary marshals, recognised for past service to France. Perignon was one of these. A former officer in the Royal Army, he'd won fame in the Revolutionary Wars, fighting the Spanish on the Pyrenees front.
That's actually super interesting. He had 4 marshals that weren't put into place like the other marshals. It was like a historical position. It was a position of like past deeds done. That's super interesting.
He later served as ambassador to Spain. After a brief retirement, he was sent to Italy and commanded the French left wing at the disastrous Battle of Novi, where the army was routed by Suvorov's Russians, and Perignon was badly wounded and captured. His appointment as honorary marshal in 1804 was a political move by Napoleon, a way to win acceptance for his new empire, by emphasizing continuity with the revolution, by rewarding its military heroes.
That is something that he actually was really good at. You know, we focus on this strictly like military achievements of Napoleon, and it's kind of obvious why, right? I mean, he conquers all of Europe basically, but he does even administrative stuff very well for France. He seems to be politically savvy. He has people in his corner who are politically savvy. He also has some people that are against him that are extremely politically savvy. But this is one of those things that, like, when you look at it strategically, when he first comes into power, this is smart. You know, you need the backing of the revolution. This is the direction that France is going. And so you tie your new empire to the revolution, and it makes it seem as if it is just continuity, that this is just the evolution of, you know, what the revolution has become.
Perignon never held active command as a marshal, but served as governor of Parma, and later Naples. His eldest son, Pierre, was a cavalry officer, killed at Friedland in 1807. Perignon retired in 1813, but refused to support Napoleon when he returned from exile in 1815 and was stripped of his marshal's baton. His rank was later restored by King Louis XVIII. 25. Marshal Brune. Brune was another marshal whose appointment owed much to politics. As a fiery Republican and former close ally of revolutionary leader Georges Danton, his support was politically useful for Napoleon. Brune joined the army during the Terror, the most extreme period of the revolution. His political connections ensured rapid promotion, and he was sent to help put down a counter-revolutionary revolt in Bordeaux. In 1795, as a 30-year-old brigadier general, he helped Napoleon disperse a royalist mob in Paris with the famous whiff of grape shot. Brune then served with Napoleon in Italy, fighting in several of his famous early victories. He won a reputation as a fierce divisional commander and enthusiastic plunderer of Italian towns and churches. In 1798, he commanded the French occupation of Switzerland, while extorting 200,000 francs from the wealthy Swiss communes, the equivalent of several $1 million today. It was said that Brune's personal carriage was so laden with gold when it left Switzerland that it immediately broke down. The next year he won his most important victory, while commanding French forces in Holland, defeating an Anglo-Russian army at the Battle of Castricum and saving France from invasion. But a short, calamitous spell commanding the army of Italy convinced Napoleon that Brune was not fit for high command. Instead, he sent him to be ambassador to the Ottoman Empire, where in 1804 he learned that he'd been made a marshal. But Brune's lack of delicacy, combined with a towering sense of self-importance, did not make him a successful diplomat. He was recalled to France, but as governor of the Hanseatic ports, blundered again, drafting a treaty with Sweden that failed to make any mention of the French emperor. Whether a deliberate insult or act of incompetence, Napoleon was furious, and Brune was sacked.
So, we talked about this in the comments of the last video about different armies, militaries, empires, but whenever you're playing this political game, whenever the appointments given are based in politics and not specifically in merit, that can become a major problem really quickly, because that person may not be fit for the job. And in a lot of cases, they aren't fit for the job. They're put there specifically for political reasons. And then they end up making a bunch of mistakes because they never should have been in that position to begin with. That kind of seems like what's happening here.
Brune spent the next 7 years at his country estate. He bitterly opposed the return of the Bourbon monarchy in 1814, and rallied to Napoleon when he returned from exile the next year. But in the tumult following Napoleon's defeat at Waterloo, Brune was cornered by a royalist mob in Avignon, murdered, and tossed into the River Rhône.
Dang.
24. Marshal Sergey. Sergey was another of the 4 honorary marshals whom Napoleon wished to recognize for past service. In contrast to Brune, Sergey was a professional soldier of the old school, a veteran of the 7 Years' War, and a stern disciplinarian.
Wow.
This background was not necessarily an asset during the French Revolution, when any officer who'd served in the Royal Army was viewed with suspicion. But
yeah, that's what I was about to say. He has ties to the old guard. That's very interesting. I didn't know there was anybody that served in a position this high who had been a part of the French Empire before the Revolution and Napoleon. I thought they would have all been outright dismissed, let go, put in the past.
But Colonel
Or killed. I mean, because a lot of people were killed for that.
Sergey's training and diligence were soon recognized as assets to the new French Republic. By 1795, he was a general serving with Napoleon in Italy, where his stand against corruption and looting won him the nickname the Virgin of Italy. Sergey was a reliable, if unspectacular, commander who won an important victory at Mondovi at a crucial moment in Napoleon's rise to fame.
I know that nickname is given to him in significance for his, sturdiness against, corruption and plundering and stuff, but yikes, I would not want that nickname.
The following year, he accepted the Austrian surrender at the end of the long siege of Mantua. 2 years later, fighting under General Moreau's command, Sergey and his division were cut off by the Russians and forced to surrender. Released on parole, he was back in Paris in time to support Napoleon's coup d'etat of 18 Brumaire. Sergey then retired from active command, but Napoleon, remembering his past service, made him an honorary marshal and governor of Les Invalides, the retirement home and hospital for old soldiers. There, shortly before the fall of Paris in 1814, Sergey oversaw the burning of more than 1,000 captured flags and standards to prevent them falling into Allied hands. 23. Marshal Kellermann. Kellermann was another honorary marshal, the oldest at 68, and famed throughout France as the saviour of the revolution. A career soldier from a middle-class background, he'd seen distinguished service as a cavalry officer in the 7 Years' War.
Wow, another one.
At the beginning of the Revolutionary Wars, he was a general, commanding a frontier army at the moment of greatest crisis, when it seemed foreign invasion was about to stamp out the revolution and restore the ancien régime. But at Valmy, in September 1792, Kellermann's Army of the Centre stood its ground, and with a ferocious artillery barrage, persuaded the Prussian army to withdraw. Valmy was not a stunning tactical victory, but it was a turning point of history that saved the infant French Republic. When the revolution took a more radical turn, even a war hero like Kellermann became suspected of royalist links, and spent a year in prison under the threat of the guillotine.
See, that is exactly what my thought process was on anybody that had ties to, the old monarchy. That if they fought under them, whatever their connection was, that I thought this would be more the treatment. But golly, this guy turned right around and led an army against the invasion right whenever the breakout happened. That's really crazy, because he literally stood up against the invasion that was going to put down the French Revolution. Like, they were absolutely going to put down the French Revolution. He holds serve there, and then even with that, they still feared the ties to the old monarchy and put him in prison, and I guess nearly kill him.
Acquitted and restored to command, he was poised to launch a new offensive in Italy, when he was sidelined, first by General Scherer, then in favour of a rising new talent, General Bonaparte. Kellermann later specialised in army administration and training, a role he continued to perform under Napoleon, whilst also entering politics and serving as President of the Senate. His son, General François-Étienne Kellermann, followed in his father's footsteps, serving as one of Napoleon's best cavalry commanders. 22. Marshal Grouchy. When Napoleon returned from his first exile in 1815, he created one last marshal for the upcoming campaign, Emmanuel de Grouchy. Although now infamous for failing to march to Napoleon's aid during the Battle of Waterloo, up to that moment, Grouchy had had a long and distinguished military career.
Okay, this is something that I'm super interested about, because he made him a marshal and then he immediately failed. And failed in a big way and in a big moment. So I'm interested about his military history.
An aristocrat who embraced the French Revolution, Grouchy served with distinction throughout the Revolutionary Wars, fighting counter-revolutionaries in the Vendée and serving in Italy, where he was wounded and captured at the Battle of Novi. Under the Empire, Grouchy excelled as commander of a dragoon division in Marshal Murat's cavalry reserve. He was praised by the Emperor for his part in the Great French Charge at Eylau, played an important role buying time for Napoleon at Friedland, and expertly covered the French right wing at Wagram. For the invasion of Russia, he commanded 3rd Cavalry Corps and was wounded at Borodino. He survived the horrors of the retreat, but was left so exhausted it took him several months to recover. He returned for Napoleon's 1814 campaign in France, and was wounded twice more. Grouchy was made a marshal at the start of the 100 Days campaign, and commanded Napoleon's right wing at Ligny. After the battle was won, he was ordered to pursue the retreating Prussians to prevent them joining up with Wellington's Anglo-Allied army. 2 days later, as the Battle of Waterloo raged 10 miles to the west, Grouchy made the fateful decision to follow his written orders rather than march to join Napoleon, and has been widely blamed for the French Emperor's defeat ever since. Grouchy's vilification is not wholly fair, not least because Napoleon rarely encouraged his marshals to show initiative, and often flew into rages if they deviated from his written orders.
That is one of the things that's actually very interesting about the whole mess up, all of the things that didn't go Napoleon's way in the lead up to Waterloo and then in Waterloo itself. Maybe it's because he's been out of the game, he's been on Elba, so, you know, he's kind of coming back and getting into things. I'm not sure what it is, but there was so much miscommunication up and down the line, and because of this specific thing, because he did not want marshals to deviate from the given instructions, it's easy to blame him, but it's kind of hard to blame him at the same time. Because of that, because Napoleon hated deviations from his plan. So, when somebody doesn't deviate from the plan, but it ends up costing you, it's hard to wholly blame Grouchy here.
Nor should one blunder obscure the distinguished record of one of the Grande Armée's best cavalry generals. Grouchy fled to America after Napoleon's defeat to escape royalist reprisals, but was pardoned and returned to France in 1820. 21. Marshal Monsieur. Monsieur ran away from home to join the army at the age of 15. After 20 years of uneventful service, he'd risen no higher than the rank of captain. But then came the French Revolution. Most French officers were aristocrats, who, if they did not actively oppose the revolution, were nevertheless regarded as politically suspect.
And not only that, the hierarchy of French politics, of the French military, of the French society almost completely, was that there was a glass ceiling for people who were not of a certain nobility, right? So there is a couple of different things happening when the French Revolution comes. One is, yes, there are a lot of people who have the old monarchy ties. They are immediately discarded. If they are not outright killed, they are imprisoned. They are done away with, right? So that opens up a ton of new positions. But also you have these people who are not in the aristocracy or are not nearly high enough up in the aristocracy, their family is not, that they would ever be able to touch these positions if the old monarchy was still in place. But now that the revolution has come along and things are far different as far as what can get you into those positions, there are now not only a lot of positions open, but these people that had those ceilings above them are able to break through and go to higher commands.
The result was that 3/4 of them either fled the country or were dismissed from the army. Monsieur, a middle-class officer with no strong political views, reaped the benefit with meteoric promotion. By 1794, General Monsieur was leading the army of the Western Pyrenees to victory over the Spanish, on what was admittedly a relative backwater of the Revolutionary Wars. In 1797, he was dismissed for alleged royalist sympathies, but reinstated in time to support Napoleon's coup of 18 Brumaire. By his own admission, Monsieur was a sensitive officer, honest, honourable, but lacking a ruthless streak or iron will to succeed. Napoleon was aware of his limitations as a general, but made him a marshal in 1804 as part of his emphasis on continuity between the Republic and his new empire. Monsieur was appointed Inspector General of the Gendarmerie, France's militarized police force, and spent most of the rest of his career commanding reserve troops. He only held one field command again. In light of his victorious record against the Spanish, he was given command of a corps for the 1808 invasion of Spain, operating in the south of the country with mixed success. In 1809 he was replaced by General Junot, and returned to France. Moncey's finest hour came in the dying days of the Empire, leading the National Guard of Paris in a courageous but doomed defense of the French capital. In 1815, the restored King of France, Louis XVIII, ordered Marshal Moncey to preside at the trial of Marshal Ney for treason. Moncey regarded Ney as a hero for having saved so many French lives in Russia, and refused, declaring, "If I am not allowed to save my country nor my own life, then at least I will save my honor." After a short spell in prison, Moncey was allowed to resume his military career, becoming governor of Les Invalides, in which role he presided over the repatriation of Napoleon's remains from St. Helena in 1840. At the end of the ceremony, the 86-year-old Marshal Moncey announced, "And now, let us go home to die." 20. Marshal Pognatovsky. Prince Józef Poniatowski was the King of Poland's nephew, but his military career began as a cavalry officer in the Austrian army, even serving as aide-de-camp to Emperor Józef II himself. In 1789, he transferred to the Polish army with the rank of Major General, but could not save Poland from partition by its rapacious neighbours, Russia, Prussia, and Austria. By 1795, Poland had vanished from the map, swallowed up by its rivals. After Napoleon's defeat of Prussia in 1806, Poniatowski decided loyal service to the French Emperor was the best way to win Poland's restoration, although he never fully trusted Napoleon's aims. Sombre, serious, and brave, Poniatowski proved an able commander of Duchy of Warsaw forces in Napoleon's service. When war broke out with Austria in 1809, while Napoleon advanced on Vienna, Poniatowski waged a brilliant supporting campaign against a larger Austrian army in Galicia. For the invasion of Russia, he commanded the Polish Fifth Corps. He and his troops distinguished themselves first at Smolensk and again at Borodino, leading the attack on the right wing. Poniatowski and his corps performed heroically throughout the campaign, motivated in part by their old animosity towards Russia. But by the end of the retreat, Fifth Corps had been virtually destroyed. Poniatowski remained loyal to Napoleon, even though the disaster in Russia paved the way for the Russian reoccupation of Poland. He rejoined Napoleon in Germany in 1813 and was given command of the Polish Eighth Corps.
Yeah, but you can understand from the Polish perspective why they throw in their lot with Napoleon. I mean, it's really the only opportunity to get a sovereign state. And so everybody's kind of doing what they have to do here. You know what I mean? Like, everybody's kind of going with the wind as far as the direction that they need to go in order to have anything that resembles a sovereign Polish state.
The eve of the Battle of Leipzig, he was made a marshal by Napoleon in recognition of his service and to inspire his Polish troops. Poniatowski was the only non-Frenchman to receive this honor.
Wow, that's what I was going to say. I didn't know that there were any non-French marshals. Wow, that is crazy.
He and his troops fought with their usual tenacity and skill at Leipzig, holding key villages on the southern front against the Austrian and Prussian onslaught. At the end of the battle, Poniatowski commanded part of the rearguard. But their only escape route, a bridge over the Elster River, was blown up too soon. Badly wounded, Poniatowski tried to escape by riding his horse across the river, but he was swept from his saddle and drowned. He had been...
That still, the blowing up of the bridge, the not building more bridges, that still is one of those things that, like, it would have been such a small thing to have built more bridges. And it becomes such a huge, impactful mess that ends up happening that the whole thing is brutal.
A marshal for just 4 days.
Damn.
In the short term, Poniatowski's loyalty to France achieved nothing, as following Napoleon's defeat, Russia occupied Poland for the next century. But Poniatowski's legend lived on, a model of Polish patriotism that inspired future generations. Marshal Jadot. As a young French private, Jadot saw combat in Georgia during the American Revolutionary War, but he then caught a fever that led to his discharge and plagued him for the rest of his life. When the French Revolution began, he was elected captain of his local National Guard unit, fought at the battles of Jemappes and Hochschutter, and was rapidly promoted to general. In 1794, he made his name defeating coalition forces at the Battle of Fleurus. This was a crucial victory of the Revolutionary War, which handed France control of Belgium for 20 years. It was also notable for the French army's use of balloon reconnaissance, the first effective use of an aircraft in military history. Jadot became a
Wow. Wow, that is crazy. I did not know that. I know of some of the earlier examples of using hot air balloons for reconnaissance, but I did not know that one specifically.
Prominent politician under the Directory, lending his name to a law that formalized France's policy of mass conscription. As a committed Republican, Jadot refused to support Napoleon's coup of 18 Brumaire, but his fame as the victor of Fleurus was enough to ensure he became a marshal in 1804. Jadot was on good terms with Napoleon's elder brother, Joseph. When Joseph became king of Spain in 1808, Jadot went with him as his military advisor. But the situation in Spain would prove beyond Jadot's military skills to solve. He faced stubborn resistance from the Spanish and Portuguese, supported by the British, and an equally stubborn refusal to cooperate from other French marshals in Spain, theoretically under Jadot's command, but who repeatedly ignored his orders and openly questioned his competence. Marshal Soult in Andalusia was a prime offender, while Marshal Victor's insubordination at the Battle of Talavera contributed directly to the French defeat. Struck by another bout of ill health, Jadot went home to recover. 2 years later he returned to Spain, but at the Battle of Vitoria in 1813, he and King Joseph were outmaneuvered and decisively beaten by Wellington, leading to the collapse of the Bonapartist Kingdom of Spain. Jadot never held a major command again, but his 20 years of service and evident patriotism were widely recognized and respected. He was made a peer by Napoleon, a count by Louis XVIII, and died in 1833 while serving as governor of Les Invalides. Perignon, Brune, Serrurier, Kellermann, Grouchy, Moncey, Pognatovsky, Jadot. 8 down, 18 to go. Join us for part 2, when we'll continue the countdown. Coming soon. Thank you to Call.
Alright, so that was the first episode of Napoleon's Marshals. I will get to the next one tomorrow, and I'll see you guys then.